Thank you, Sandeep. Sandeep has been enjoying his explanation about the Social Security Code in detail, and I believe he has made his concept clear to all of us that what are the basic changes that have taken place into the code. As you know, all these 29 acts have been subsumed into 4 codes. Similarly, the Occupational Safety, Health and Working Condition Code also subsumed 13 acts, which has been taken into consideration for jointly responsible for all these safety, health and working condition into the establishments or factories. Those are namely the Factories Act, the Plantation Act, Mines Act, Working Journalist and Newspaper Employee Conditions, Working Journalist, the Motor Transport, the BD and cigar workers, the Contract Labor Regulation Abolition Act, the Sales Promotion Employees, the Interstate Migrant Worker, the cine workers, dock workers, safety, building and other construction workers. Now come to the preliminary part of it and the definition part of it. The appropriate government, as has already been explained by Sarvasap, that holding of PSUs, even if the holding becomes less than 50%, even then the appropriate government will be central government. And same goes in the state governments also. The definition of wages has already been explained across, it is similar across all the 4 codes. Now, when you look at the codes, in the acts at various places, the definitions of work ban or the wages were explained in different ways, though the meaning was similar, but the words were different. Here, the definition of wages has been dittoed in all the 4 codes. Workers, those employees, those who are engaged into skilled, unskilled, semi-skilled category, also includes supervisory capacity getting salary less than 18,000 rupees. It also includes the sales promotions employee. Those are working for sales, but the condition here is again is that drawing salary less than 18,000. Building and other constructions worker has now increased the limit of eligibility, whereby building, construction worker or residential purpose of individual or group of individual for the use for their own use, but the amount spent so in construction of the building is less than 50 lakhs will not be covered under building and other construction work. Contract labor, who is employed in connections of work of establishment hired by contractor with or without the knowledge of principal employer, and includes interstate migrant worker. Contractor is a person who supplies the manpower to carry out the work of an establishment and includes subcontractor. Machinery, it is combination of article or combination of article used to intended to be used for converting any form of energy to perform work into perform the work. Employee is respect of establishment, a person other than apprenticeship who is engaged to do skilled, semi-skilled, unskilled, manual, operational, supervisory, managerial, administrative, technical, clerical work or hire or reward. Now here in all these codes you will find, since these codes have been subsumed by taking few acts into one code, here you will find that the definition you will find the word establishment or employees being used more frequently than the worker or the factory which we are used to. Similarly, sales promotions imply those who are drawing salary less than 18,000, but it excludes those who are employed in managerial and administrative capacity. The factory, the section 2W, the threshold limit from 10 to 20 has been increased with use of power and 40 without the use of power. Employer, occupier is employer in the factory. In case of mines, it is manager or mining agent. In case of establishment, it is manager or managing director. Go down. The word go down has first time been used because the go down is where the frequent movement goes for material inside the storage of the material, maybe which is used in the process of manufacturing, or even otherwise the working condition therein go down has to be taken into consideration. Similarly, core activity has been defined. Any activity for which the establishment is set up includes activity which is essential. It clearly segregates the core activities and other activities. The other activities which are not core are segregated, say like sanitation, security, canteen, loading, unloading, courier, transportation, service, ambulance service, and other activities of intermittent nature. We have always been under confusion while discussing the perennial nature of job and the activities which are being carried out into the organization, whether the activity are of perennial nature or not. So that has been clearly segregated, that the core activity has been totally segregated from the other activities which are not required, which are not attached with the essential activity for which the establishment is set up. Interstate migrant workers means a person who is employed in an establishment has been recruited directly by the employer indirectly through contractor in one state for the employment in such state in another state, has on his own from one state and obtain employment in the other state. Now chapter 2 deals with registration. After the commencement of the code, every establishment has to apply for registration within 60 days electronically and to the registering authority, and it shall be deemed to be registered if the information about the registration is not received within 30 days. Cessation of operation. Similarly, when any establishment is to be closed down, the way it has been informed while registering, the cessation of operation or closing down of an establishment has to be informed to the registering authority. In this section, there are appeals which lies to the registering officer authority and thereafter for any litigation. Duties of employer and employee. Now, employer has to provide safe working conditions in the facility by ensuring that plant and machinery is so designed that it does not make unsafe place for employees working there. Comply with occupational safety and health prescribed under the code. Annual health examination as prescribed by the appropriate government at such age as required, and in dangerous operations or hazardous operation, it has to the medical examination free of cost has to be carried out before employing a person into that activity, into that process. That every employer has to issue the appointment letter to employee so prescribed by the appropriate government. Duties of designer, manufacturer, importer and supply is defined in the code. That every manufacturer, importers has to supply the machines or the machinery which is safe for working into the company or establishments. That certificate is required, that manufacturing and importer supplies, even the importers has to give a certificate for the safety and the provisions of this. Duties of architect, project and engineer and designer is defined in the code. For building and other construction activities, the architect, project engineer and designer has to give in detail the procedure plans so that the life of the workers is not at stake while working in the building and other construction activities. Duty of employees, that every employee takes reasonable care of his health and safety and comply and cooperate with employer in meeting out statutory obligation under the code. National Occupational Safety and Health Advisory Board, to frame standard rules, regulation under the code. Similarly, every state has to formulate state advisory board and frame rules and regulation required to be executed in various establishments in the state. Safety committee. Every establishment has to have, where earlier 1,000 employees were employed, a safety committee was to be formed with equal representation of employer and employee. Here in this case, the factories wherein 500 or more employees are working, a safety committee is must. And in case of hazardous process where 250 workers are employed, it is must. In case of building and other workers, it is 250, it is mandatory. And 100, where 100 workers are working in case of mines. And it is the duty of appropriate government to appoint as many safety officers as framed or as decided by the appropriate government or state governments under the rules. Health, safety and working conditions. The chapter provides responsibility of employer for maintaining health and working condition in the establishment, and central government as well as state government may make rule for such purpose. It mainly covers safety provisions under the various acts, such as safety provisions under the Factories Act from section 20 to 40 are now mentioned in second schedule. Now, since the safety provisions covered under the Factories Act alone are not the safety measures to be taken into consideration, since this subsumes 13 Act. So all the safety precautions or safety provisions required to be followed in various establishments, mines, plantation, those have been taken in the second schedule in detail. Welfare provision. Now, for the first time, the transgender has been used. The separate washroom, restroom, washing facility, storage, drying, locker room, all those to be provided for all the three genders. A canteen facility which was earlier for 250 employees now has been reduced to 100 employees, which includes the contractual worker as well. The appointment of welfare officer in factory, mines, plantation where 250 workers are working, earlier it was for 500 under the Factories Act or more, ordinary employed in qualification. The qualification and condition of service duties of such welfare officer as decided by the appropriate government under the rules. Hours of work and annual leave with wages. Chapter 7 deals with hours of work, which is limited to 8 hours. The period of work shall be so fixed as not to exceed such hours, which shall with intervals and spread hours as may be identified by the state government or the appropriate or central government, as the case may be. Extra wage for overtime shall be double the rate The consent of worker is mandatory, however, will be decided by the appropriate under the rule. Now here I would like to explain my own thought process after having worked with the industry for so many years. The calculation of overtime in various industries is basically to avoid to pay more to the employees. Here the consent has been taken that the worker who wants prosperity at his home wants to work on overtime. The overtime is so designed by the rate of wages that every person, the wages on which the OT will be calculated will be paid double. Earlier the case was somebody was paying on basic wage, somebody was paying on basic NDA. Now it has been made clear, as explained by earlier speakers, on the payment of wages. Now every establishment has to maintain, register, records, notices as required and electronically file to the appropriate government the returns and records. The notice has to be displayed, which includes the working hours, shift hours, the inspector cum facilitator for that area and things like that. Inspector cum facilitator and other authorities. It defines the code renamed as inspector cum facilitator. Here the duty of inspector is not only to carry out the inspection and find some fault into the organization or establishments and issue some notices to pay some penalties, but here it has been required that the inspector cum facilitator has to sensitize the employer and workers regarding provisions of the code and compliances thereof. It is basically the support system which the government will be providing after the code. The word facilitator itself proves that it will be a helping kind of machinery thereafter. Working hours for women. The woman in this code has been empowered to that extent that they can work in the night shift from 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. with their consent, adhering to the rules of holiday, safety condition and working hours as provided by the employer. The women are empowered to work on dangerous operation with their consent and with adequate safety precautions provided by the employer. Chapter 9 has redefined inspector cum code, who is renamed as inspector cum facilitator, as explained earlier. Special provision for contract labor and interstate migrant worker and audiovisual workers. Contract labor applies for establishment engaging 50 or more contract labor or contract company employing 50 or more contract labor. Here also the contractor has to provide the appointment letter to each contractor employee or worker working there with him. This will apply only to the establishment engaging 10 or more interstate migrant worker. It is provided in section the employer shall to pay lump sum amount to and fro fare for the journey to his hometown once in a year. Under the new definition, audiovisual workers, singers, newspaper readers, dancers, stunt persons, technical artists, work like supervision, etc. has been covered, subject to some wage ceiling to be notified by the central government. Building and other construction activities. Now, since the Act, building and other construction activities work has taken almost every aspect in the country, the buildings, streets, road, railways, trams, towers, likewise into consideration, which are covered under the building and other construction activities, except as explained earlier that for the personal use of an individual or group of individual for his own use will not be considered as building and construction activity as notified by the appropriate government. Now coming to the offences and penalties. Here I would like to throw some light on the offences and penalties which has been enhanced to the tune of, say in some of the cases it is almost more than 10 times or even more. It is solely because if we take the important part of safety provisions prevailed in various companies, the safety of human being is of utmost importance. The employer fails to comply with the compliances which are required to be followed. If you all remember, it was night of 2nd or 3rd December 1984 when in the Union Carbide case, the methyl isolate leaked out and 20,000 employees died on 2nd and 3rd night, also affecting the health of 5 lakh employees or more. The person who was responsible is scot-free in United States and he left the country without any penalize or punishment. Now, in order to comply with the safety of all in premises has been enhanced by various offences from 1 lakh to 5 lakh, and continuation of the continuation of the offence in hazardous process has been revised to 20 lakhs and imprisonment of 5 years. In case of any non-compliance with result of accident, dangerous occurrence, cause of death shall be punishable with imprisonment of a term which may extend to 2 years or fine which shall not be less than 5 lakh rupees or both. Now here, the amount of penalty so lied in the case of death of an employee, the 50% of the amount has to be passed on to the family of the deceased. So here it is a step, a very good step by the government, where the poor family who loses the source of earning will be helped by this way, and the other compensation as decided by other courts into the country. The employee has also been made responsible to adhere to safety provisions so desired to be followed. In the employee contravenes the violates the safety measures so desired will be penalized to the tune of rupees 10,000 rupees. In case the employee is victimized and is proved for the violation, then the employer will not be held responsible for the same offense. Now coming to the schedules, there are 3 schedules in the Act. Number 1 deals with industry involving hazardous process, 2 deals with safety provisions, third deals with the notifiable disease. Thank you. So nice of you.